The Comp Plan Steering Committee has been up and running since last year. Actually, we had our first big public meeting last June at the library, had a really terrific turnout with lots of new faces and people involved in having a conversation about the comprehensive plan that I'd never even met before. So I know that our community is highly engaged always and is very interested in being part of this conversation. And that's a lot of what I think we're going to talk about tonight. So this evening's meeting is going to start off with a presentation from the BFJ planners, as well as our own village planner, Jaime Martinez. And I imagine the village trustees who represent us and participate in the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, trustees Lopez and Quesada, are with us. And I believe it's likely we'll have some other members of the Comp Plan Steering Committee who will be attending as well. So once we get the presentation and we have an opportunity to hear from staff and elected officials, then we're going to open it up to questions from the public. So thank you to anybody who is joining us either live or later on in the video when it's available on YouTube after this evening. And I would like to introduce Frank Fish, Simon Cates, and Sylvia Del Fava from BFJ Planning. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And, we've got a slight, small presentation to give, and I think we'll start with that just to really fill in the trustees first and then the public on what we've been doing so far. And this is sort of a little schedule for tonight. We've had 2 meetings already with the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. So the committee members are familiar, and what we've done with this presentation tonight is sort of try to synthesize those 2 meetings. We thought we would try to do this, our part of this. Simon and I will sort of divide this up, and from hopefully now till about 7:30. And then our thought was to turn this first to the Board of Trustees, as you can see there, from maybe around 7:30 to 8. This is up to the trustees, but depends on how many questions you have or comments. And then when you're ready, when the trustees are ready, go to members of the public and try to, members of the public can use Zoom, the Zoom platform, raise your hand, or attendees could have submitted questions in the Q&A feature. So whatever way they've done that, we'll try to answer questions. So first from the trustees and then later from the public. So that's the overall schedule for tonight. We usually try to do these sort of, the timing is up to you all. We generally do this from 7 to 9, but if it runs a little later, that's fine too. Here's the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee members. One thing about state law is that although a Comprehensive Plan Committee can help develop the plan, it does have to be adopted by the trustees. And so we're very happy to have 2 trustees, as you can see there, Omar Lopez and Manny, on the committee itself, because they'll be able to, we hope, keep the trustees continually involved. Although this is our first meeting with you to sort of summarize these 2 other meetings and keep you up to date on what we're doing. A member of the planning board, Jeff, is representing the planning board, and under state law, again, this has to be referred to the planning board. So it's good that Jeff is on. Also, you can see all of the other members of the steering committee. And the next slide just goes into, we're working on a sort of day-to-day basis with the village manager, with Karen, and also the village planner, Jaime. And then you can see Jamie, who's been very helpful for us in all of this setup. And then the assistant village manager, Maddie, and then the corporation counsel, Stuart. Our team is BFJ Planning. You're going to hear from Simon Cates in a minute. He's also a principal of BFJ, an associate principal. We have an urban design head for this team in Jonathan Martin, and then 2 planners on the team working. This is the core team of 5 of us. And then we have an economic group who shares office space with us when we're in the office. And that's Tina Lund and Peter First from Urbanomics. And then I think everyone knows Joe. from Kellard Sessions. He's your consulting engineer, and they're on our team to answer questions on infrastructure, water, sewer, that kind of utility information. So that's the overall. I want to give you just, I know the trustees, you've seen this because we've had meetings with you in the past where we showed this project schedule. This has been just slightly graphically redone to make it a little bit easier to just discuss and communicate. But you can see at the top of it, those blue sort of oblong graphs there. We're trying to meet with the committee generally about once a month. And the committee will go through, we think, at least this year, probably intensively through October or so, where they need to have some outreach sessions and some workshops. We're trying to set those up so they'll be initially virtual, and then it depends on the fall and how things develop with this coronavirus protocols, maybe something that can be within the village and in person. But they have to, the law requires them to hold their own hearing on the draft plan while it's developed by them in the process of developing it. So we hope that can happen in the fall. When that does happen, that's when it gets, the public has a chance to formally comment on it, and then it will be turned over by the committee. And what the law provides is the committee sends it to the trustees, and then the trustees then go through the draft plan. And we think the trustees are going to need time to do that. And what we hope to be doing also, as you can see on the line with the purple in it, the zoning code evaluation, draft zoning code update, is to have been working with both the committee and the trustees as things are identified in the plan, and there are zoning ramifications to that. We would try to provide those updates in text or map form to the trustees also. So the trustees will be getting a draft plan and also a draft code update. And we hope to work very closely with your counsel, with Stuart, on that. The yellow sections of all of this are required by state law. So the state law called SEEKR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, that requires us, it really requires the trustees as what's called the lead agency, because you're the ones, as the Board of Trustees, who would adopt the plan and the zoning code, any zoning code updates. We have to do what's called an EAF, an environmental assessment form, and then the Board of Trustees would determine the significance of the action. And if the action has any significant adverse impact possibilities, we would then do a full generic environmental impact statement. And one part of that is scoping, as you can see there in the second yellow line. And that just, all scoping is it just creates an outline in which the public participates in to create that DGEIS, that draft generic environmental impact statement. What we're hoping is that we can coordinate these three issues, and so that when the trustees get the plan from the committee later this year, they can work on it. They will have drafts of zoning so that next winter, getting into 2021 in February and March, you would be in a position to hold a public hearing on these items. And all through this process, at the bottom there in sort of the orangish brown, we're hoping to do a whole series of public outreaches all through the process, public surveys, a set of subcommittee meetings, which Simon will go into, and it's online outreach that will be just ongoing throughout the process so that the public can constantly be both updated and participate. So we want this to be, we hope it will be a very inclusive process. So after that hearing, you'd be in a position to finalize the plan. We would make the changes you request in the plan, finalize a zoning code update, and then you have to, under the law, we have to do something called the final generic environmental impact statement, and then a set of seeker findings. And that would put you, once those are done, it would put you in a position in the spring, I hope, to adopt the plan or adopt it with final revisions that you, the Board of Trustees, wish to make. So that's the overall sort of public schedule on this. I think the next slide, Simon, just gives sort of what is. A lot of people have asked what is a comprehensive plan. I think many of you who have been in the village a while, you're familiar with it because you have, I think, a good base for us doing this. You have a 2009 comprehensive plan. It has in it all of the components, I would say, that the state law requires. State law outlines about 10 or 11 items that have to be included in a comp plan. But it really is something that is for the whole village. And as you can see, that first dot point sets goals, recommended actions for the village and the future. But it is a plan. So it's a document that has perhaps a lot of information, data in it, strategies, policies in it, but it is not itself a capital budget or a zoning regulation. So those come after a plan. And in theory, there's a court case saying that zoning should be based on a well-reasoned plan. We hope that third dot point here, that this plan will result. It should not be our plan, it should be the village's plan, and it should result from a whole public outreach planning process and effort. So I would say also that the plan itself will have the components required in the law, and hopefully it will have a good amount of current data showing Ossining, I would call it Ossining today, and then a vision for Ossining tomorrow. So the next slide, I just wanted to comment that, as you know, New York State is a home rule state. So the comprehensive plan is something that is done at a local level. A county can do a plan. Westchester County has a countywide 2025 plan. And the surrounding town of Ossining has traditionally had a plan. And I'm told by Karen that they're looking to update their current plan. So the village is really, in terms of land use and zoning, independent from the surrounding town and independent from the county. So its responsibility is to create its own plan. However, the town, we're hoping that we will be able to coordinate this plan with town efforts and to be able to look at the existing town plan also, and to be aware of what's surrounding us. The village, obviously, of Briarcliff Manor and north of us, Croton, where we have worked on their, had the opportunity to work on their plan. By the way, on this, I just mentioned the little purple dotted line is the school district, which is, as in many Westchester municipalities, not coterminous with the village or the town. It's its own district, includes the village, and includes parts of Briarcliff Manor, and then includes a part of Newcastle and a very small part of Yorktown. So they're their own entity. Obviously, I think everyone knows that, but I just wanted to point out that there is the village itself must control, only the trustees can adopt your own plan. And that relies also for Briarcliff Manor, only those trustees can do their plan, and the town has its own jurisdiction to do a town-wide plan. So the next slide goes into what does state law sort of suggest. It doesn't say that you have to have these exact chapters. Where these chapters came from was mostly your current 2009 plan. As we got into this, we realized that land use and zoning was so important, the zoning issues, that we've created a chapter 3, which is not in the current plan. We suggested to the committee adding that. And then the current plan also sort of ends with a cultural historic resources, but it doesn't have an action agenda or an implementation, sort of a summary chapter. And we suggested adding that. So there'd be potentially 10 chapters in this plan. And we're hoping that those 10 chapters will cover all of the suggested items of New York State law. And as we go on with our committee, we've already presented to the committee some data from Chapter 2. We're going to write the chapters sequentially, and Chapter 2 is an overview, and it has in it, that's where the social demographic information, population information will be. We've presented that to the committee, and then at our next committee meeting, we'll present some land use and zoning issues, and each committee meeting will then go on with the waterfront, downtown, that kind of process. So this will be continuous, and the public will be able to see each of these chapters after the committee has reviewed them and is comfortable with them. They can go up on the website. So that's the idea of a gradual production of this plan. So Simon, you can go to that next slide. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Simon Cates to talk about public outreach and the outreach process we would like to go through.
Great, thank you, Frank. The first thing that I wanted to highlight here is just that we have a website. It's up online, austininComprehensiveplan.com. As we are working through this process, hopefully eventually there's a time when we'll be able to have meetings like this in person. But in the meantime, and throughout the planning process, we hope everyone views the website as a hub of online activities. It's a way to stay informed about the process and other ways to get involved. There's other ways too. We've been coordinating with the village on social media to make sure that we're getting the word out that way as well. But we hope that folks keep an eye on the website. Visit it this evening and in the next few days, and start getting a feel for the information that's up there. And as we have drafts that are sort of approved by the village and the committee, we'll post those online so that the public can review them as well. The first thing with the website that we hope people start to do is we often like to give a comprehensive plan a sort of unique name that we can develop a brand around. What we've done so far is we brainstormed some ideas with the committee, came up with a couple of dozen ideas, then went back to the committee and filtered that down to, I think, about 5. And if you go to austininComprehensiveplan.com, click on Get Involved, and then Survey, there's a survey there where people can vote. And we'll see what the community likes, which name you all think sort of best expresses your vision for the future of the village, sort of as expressed through this planning process. So please do that. We want to get as much input there as we can. Let your friends and neighbors know to do that as well, so that we get some feedback, and we'll sort of allow the community to select the name of the plan. The next thing we wanted to talk about here, just because it's such forefront of everyone's mind, is just this unique moment that we're in order to conduct a comprehensive planning process. This is, certainly different from other processes that we've been involved in, not being able to meet people in person. And it's a fair question that people may have in the community. Why are we even doing this now? Why not wait until this crisis blows over? We've talked this through with the village and with the committee. We think this is the time to proceed, to set the village up so that when we get on the other side of the COVID-19 crisis, you all are prepared. The village is prepared to bounce back from a public health standpoint, from an economic standpoint, in terms of neighborhoods. And there's sort of two sides of this. The one side here is that we're able to see sort of the new normal developing around us. And a lot of it relates to economic trends that had already been observed, were already underway, but they're moving faster now, right? the impact of online retail on Main Street businesses, that's not new as a result of COVID-19, but it is certainly more impactful and more difficult in a lot of ways for small retail businesses, for Austin's downtown. So we want to start thinking about what those impacts are going to be and how the village is prepared to bounce back. The second item here, shift towards flexible work, co-working, working from home. This is one of those planning ideas that people have suggested is on the horizon for several years. Now, was this 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, or maybe it was never going to happen? We don't really know. But now we're all in the midst of this, right? We're all sitting at home right now. A lot of us are working from home. And this might be part of a new normal going forward. And this is going to have impacts on the village. Some may be challenges that need to be overcome, and others may be opportunities that we can build on to make sure that we're prepared for changes like this going forward. Expansion of delivery services, changes in transportation patterns are going to make us think about how we need to start allocating the public realm in different ways, so that there's enough space for pickup and drop off. But also there may be ways that we can think about reallocating space for pedestrians, for bikelists that are giving people enough space in the public realm. Public health is a concept in planning that has been building steam over the last 2 years, and we expect that's going to be even stronger now in this day and age. And the last item here we think is key. Hopefully there will be substantial more additional federal funds that can be passed through the state, distributed to municipalities. And we think Austin needs to be prepared. We think the plan can help you know what the next steps are, so that you're in a position to go out and seek funding and put yourselves in a better position to bounce back. And the other side of this here, this COVID-19 strategy, is how do we do this, right? If the argument is that yes, we should indeed continue planning during this day and age, how do we do it in a way that makes sure that the community input is robust, is substantial, and is inclusive? And so we've got a few ideas here that we'll go through over the course of the process. Number one, I mentioned the website. Please visit the website throughout the planning process. There will be a series of online surveys. The first one, there's just one question, is what do you think the name of the plan should be? There will be other surveys going forward so that we can continue to gather input. The village is going to be doing a lot of social media through Facebook to provide updates throughout the process. And we're also going to be using this tool, Social Pinpoint. I'll talk about it a little bit on the next slide as well. Online interactive tools that we can use to sort of get input during this period of time when we can't meet everyone in person. The last item here, I'm going to talk about subcommittees in a moment. Subcommittees are one way that we're sort of gathering information about different chapters of the plan, but the different sort of stakeholders, community members, community organizations that we work with on these subcommittees, we also see as partners in getting the word out. We know that a lot of community organizations in Austining are learning, just as we are, what's the way to reach our constituents in this period of time. And so we want to, as much as we can, piggyback on that knowledge so that we're not reinventing the wheel. We can work with others in the community to make sure that we're getting the word out to everyone, running an inclusive process. This is just a brief overview on a couple of these Social Pinpoint tools. The one on the left here, the ideas wall, is the first one that we're going to kick off in the next couple of weeks. This is a way for us to get input on your vision for the plan. It's like a sticky board where you put a Post-it note on the poster with your ideas. The next one on the right, the interactive map, is something that we might deploy a little bit later on, late summer into the fall, where we can start getting ideas about what are some of the key issues and opportunities that we need to hear about. By the way, I see that there are a few questions coming into the Q&A. Please keep them coming. I just want to remind everyone, as Frank said, we're not ignoring these. We're going to circle back to these when we get to the public portion, just to make sure everyone knows. So here on the subcommittees, I referred to these a moment ago. For each of the substantive chapters of the plan, we've been working with Karen, the village manager, and Jaime, village planner, on sort of gathering together these different groups of stakeholders so that we can have a meeting, probably a virtual meeting if these happen in the next couple of months, which we hope they will, where we can talk with these sort of subject area experts in the community to learn about what we need to include in these different chapters of the plan. The members of the subcommittees will provide technical information about these different topic areas. That's, of course, not the end of the discussion. We're also going to gather input from members of the public, from the community. But also, it's critical for us to work with these subcommittee members to also spread the word, as I mentioned on a previous slide, to make sure that the process is inclusive and that we're hearing from people. So these subcommittee members are not just providing expertise; they're also liaisons into the community to make sure that we're reaching folks in the community. On the bottom left here, I just want to point out, there are any number of community organizations throughout Ossining. Not everybody is going to be on a subcommittee, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from folks. So if you know of a group out there, if you're a member of an organization, you're not sure if we're hearing from you, please reach out to the village manager. The email address is here, and we can set up another way to make sure that we're hearing your input. There's subcommittees are sort of one method of gathering information, but it's not the only one. So please do reach out. One item here. The committee members are being held every third Tuesday from 7 to 9 p.m. So the next one is coming up on May 19. We've had two so far, as Frank mentioned. They're virtual. They're held similarly to this meeting right now. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we can all gather together at Village Hall. But in the meantime, we've been holding these meetings virtually. They're live streamed via Zoom. They're on the village's YouTube channel. They're also on the YouTube links are also on the comprehensive plan website, so folks can go there, look at the prior presentations in both English and Spanish, and also watch the full videos on YouTube. And that brings it to a close. Frank, I'll turn it back to you to sort of transition us back to the Q&A.
Yeah, this is the first slide that you saw. We just wanted to leave it up for a minute to make clear that hopefully I just turn it back to the mayor and trustees so that we could have a little questions and comments from them first, and then open this to the public. So, Mayor, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Frank.
Right.
So I'm really pleased to see that even during this time when it's so difficult for people to be able to think about something as seemingly removed and abstract as a comprehensive plan, that we have almost 24 people who are attending that I know have questions. So I look forward to hearing from them. But first, I would like to hear from any of my why don't we start with trustees Quesada and Lopez, since you folks have been participating in all of these meetings. Do you want to expand on what we've heard so far from the planners here and sort of frame our conversation?
I'd be happy to jump in. I'll start it off. First, good evening, Frank and Simon and the whole team. Thank you for the work you've put into this so far. It has been of high quality, and I'm excited to have you. To the community members that are joining us and that are watching this later on, I want to underscore the importance of why we are doing this. There are right now, there are 37 people that are in this meeting. There are likely closer to 30,000 that are in our community. We represent a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the people who make up our community. And if we're going to make a plan about what the next decade is going to look like for Ossining, it cannot just involve the people in this digital room. It requires the voice of folks who have just got here, that have lived here their whole lives, people that represent many different interests and groups and ways of life. And because the interests and the priorities that people have are not singular. We need many, many voices to make this happen. And so thank you to the folks who are here. And it's a time in history that is very strange with the coronavirus. It's very, very weird. And as a result, that's going to shape what all of this looks like. Plus, this is a time when we are asking folks already to do a lot to get the word out. Get the word out about the census. Don't forget to be counted. Get the word out about the election coming up. Don't forget to vote. Get the word, it's like a lot of public participation. Being a citizen requires work, and this is part of that work. But in exchange, we get a democracy that we have a workforce. So those are some opening thoughts. I'll give some final opening thoughts in Spanish. Le quiero dar la gracia a todos los que están viendo esto ahora en vivo, pero también en video más tarde. La voz de la comunidad hispana es de toda la comunidad, pero especialmente de la comunidad hispana en nuestro pueblo es súper importante. Sabemos que 50% más o menos de nuestra comunidad es hispana, y para tener un plan integral que refleja las prioridades de nuestra comunidad, tenemos que participar en cosas así. Ser miembro del comité o participar en una de las actividades que vienen. Tenemos tiempo porque este plan va a comenzar ahora y tenemos más o menos un año antes que terminemos, pero tenemos que trabajar juntos para asegurarnos que la voz de nosotros, no solamente los hispanos, pero todos, esté parte de este plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Lopez. Trustee Quesada, did you want to chime in before we open it up for more general questions about tonight's presentation and next steps?
No, just real quick. We actually have 39 participants. Out of them, I think it's 25 from the public. The other ones are from staff and among ourselves. But, I'm going to echo what it was said already. I think it's important for all of us to what is the future of our village, or at least the vision of our village for the next 10 years, because there's a lot of things that could happen. There's a lot of things that had happened since 2009 when this plan was first established. So there's a lot of work that we need to, that I would like the community to participate on this going forward. So I'm going to ask for their help, for their advice, for their involvement on this process. And it's going to be something that is going to be for us. It's not for anybody else, but it's for our community, for what we see the blueprint of our village moving forward. Is definitely the master plan that we are creating, that we are working on it right now. So I want to thank all our staff, our consultants, and everybody that is going to be helping us to shape the future of our village. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much to Trustees Lopez and Quesada. I just, Jamie, or I feel like we've got, unless we're going to have more of a presentation from the screen share, can we go back to being able to see more people's faces now that we're having more of a conversation? I think thanks.
There we go.
Great. Oh, look at everybody there. How exciting to see everyone. Okay, so Trustee Fritchie, I know you're on, though I don't see your video right now. Trustee Levin, do you have any questions? Because I had the opportunity to sit on this committee last year, and then we shook things up a little bit, and Trustee Quesada joined, Lopez became a trustee. So I feel like there's sometimes it's tough for us on the village board to feel like we really have our finger on what is all of the discussions that this very important committee is figuring out. So Trustee Levin, what are your thoughts at this stage?
Trustee Levin, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Rika.
I don't know why that's doing that. Okay, that was
There we
weird.
go.
Okay.
There you
No, I don't want to repeat. I don't need to hear myself talk. I just want to add to what was already said. All the stuff that was said was great stuff. I want to add that you know, the three other trustees that are not on this and their liaisons to things, this is for us, it's almost like the public because we're hearing something for the first time. So I'm excited to see all the progress made. I am most interested personally as a public official and as a resident in this community on how the subcommittees and how the outreach actually plays out. I think the subcommittees, how they're selected, who can enter, when can they leave, all of that is the piece that is unclear to me at this point, but I know it will be clearer. So for me, I'm sort of on the lookout for how more involvement will be aggregated over time. So I thank all of you for doing so much of this upfront work.
Trustee Fritchie, did you want to comment or have any questions at this stage before we open it up to the public or to the staff?
Well, first I'd like to thank the staff for putting this all together. And this is my first comprehensive plan. So I'm looking forward to see the progress of the plan and the input from the public. As Trustee Quesada and Trustee Lopez said, you know, input from the public is going to be very important here because it is our village and we want to see it grow. So, you know, with that being said, again, it's my first one and I'm going to sit here and watch it grow. And when I have questions, I will definitely have them. So thank you again for the job you're doing and we can move forward.
Great. Karen, you've been involved in this integrally in keeping us moving even before we had Jaime on and before BFJ joined as the consultants for this project. So would you like to offer a little more perspective or context that we haven't heard yet tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. I think the biggest part of this is the need for engagement. So we're glad that we have had a lot of people call in tonight, and we hope that we can do more meetings, more virtual meetings, provide access to steering committee meetings, and as we go forward within the next couple of weeks putting together the subcommittees, again, I really want to reiterate that if you are interested, my email's been posted on this, just my information's on the website. Please contact us and me, and we will make sure that we get you involved in some way. So thank you.
Great. And Jaime, I feel like you came aboard and then we all went our separate ways. And so I've seen you in the lobby and I've never gotten to even be in a live meeting with you. So this is as close as it's going to get for the foreseeable future, at least for a little while. So welcome aboard. This is a huge project that you get to jump into as our really quite new planner here in the village. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience in other communities working on comprehensive plans and how, if you have any advice or insights for us as we embark on this new exciting stage of really involving the public in a more active way.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. And I am excited to be starting here. I've now entered my 6th year with the village. And it's been a lot of meetings, to be honest. Most days I get 3 or 4 Zoom meetings, so I've gotten quite a bit of FaceTime, even though I haven't actually been able to see people in person. But nonetheless, there are a lot of projects moving forward, and the village is definitely continuing to stay busy despite the fact that the doors are unfortunately closed. And I'm happy to see that there are now listed 28 attendees that are attending this. So it's clear that this comprehensive plan process is something that's important to the community, and people are getting engaged, which is something that I know that everyone on the board has expressed is extremely important. And of course it is. I think that, you know, I've had some experience working on a comprehensive plan in another municipality in Westchester County, the city of Mount Vernon. And the key piece of the of any comprehensive plan is to understand that for most municipalities, and certainly this is the case here in the village of Ossining, that this piece of planning work is really going to be the most consequential planning activity that the village is going to take really in over a decade since the 2009 comprehensive plan. And so the decisions that you make throughout this process, through integrating the feedback that you get from the public and trying to make solid research put together with sound decision making, are going to impact the progress that the village is able to make over the next, most likely the next 10 years until the comprehensive plan gets looked at again. So it's really important to certainly get all the feedback that you can, but also get as much good information as you can. And I will note, just to kind of follow up on what Simon mentioned earlier, the COVID crisis has really accelerated some of the changes that we're seeing just in general in the planning profession about, more people working from home and just different ways of retail working, commercial working, office space working. And so this is really kind of the best time to be looking at, how things are going to be impacted and the kinds of ways that the village needs to adapt its zoning code and its land use to better meet the needs of the village moving forward. So, I think that, with that said, the key is really to really do as much research as you can, get as much feedback as you can from the community, and try to make good decisions that help move the village forward.
Thank you very much, Jaime. Is there any other staff that would like to comment or trustees that we want to circle back to before we open it up to questions? I don't see anybody raising their hand yet, but if you have a question and you are one of our now 28 attendees, which is a pretty good number for a virtual meeting at this time, I think it's an indication of how interested our community is. Oh, I see the first hand raised. So before I call on someone from our attendees list, is there anything else that our staff or trustees would like to fill in? Yes,
we also have a list of questions that people have typed in already too, just so you're aware.
I did see that. Okay. I'm going to go to the live questions first, and then when that slows down, we'll. I think we have at least 3 different questions on some different issues that we'll make sure that we do get to those before we sign off tonight. All right. Dana White, you're the first person I see. I'm going to tap on you, and I'm going to click Allow You to Talk. And so that means that I have allowed you to talk, Dana White. So you now need to, there you go, unmute yourself.
I'm glad someone has.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody. So exciting, comprehensive plan. Yay. I was just reading through the last one. And my question, because you know me and you know what my priorities are, is a focus on the historic fabric of the village and how we're going to write into the comprehensive plan ways to maintain and enhance our historic structures, our housing stock. We have a lot of charming houses in this village, and I think there's a lot of potential there. And, is that going to be something that's top of mind for people?
Dana, one thing that I'd just like to start maybe from our team at BFJ and just say that we do think the historic character and cultural component of the village is so important that we have maintained a chapter in the plan. I'm just remembering it from rote now by chapter 9. And we'd like to have that chapter focus on historic and cultural resources of the village and go into a little bit of the history of those and the importance of those. So we have not, by the way, there's a section in the, and you know the current plan, there is a section in the current plan on it, but we also hope to reinvigorate that and get input on that part of the process and put updates into that chapter 9 of the plan on that.
And Dana, there will be a subcommittee addressing that part of the plan. And again, we'll be reaching out to subcommittee members over the next week or so. And if for whatever reason you don't get a call and you want to get involved, I just want to reiterate, contact us. We will definitely take time to listen to whatever you want to say and whatever perspective you have. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm happy to participate in that. You know where to find me.
We do.
So just to clarify again, if people are expressing interest in being a participant in a particular subcommittee, they can reach out and indicate that interest simply by emailing you, Karen, and saying, I'm interested in participating in the comprehensive plan in a subcommittee. Have we provided a list of what the subcommittees are so that someone who has an interest in the environment or in history or in business can raise their hand for those particular subcommittees?
We'll be posting this presentation, and the list of subcommittees is in this. I think we've done a similar presentation that may be posted already, but we'll make sure we get that information out some way, and we're also are reaching out to some of the usual suspects too, in terms of we know who knows history in Austin. So hopefully through the subcommittees themselves, they'll be able to do an even broader reach to get more people in.
Great. I see we have, does anybody else want to comment on the historic character before we move on to our next question from someone named Marianne? Okay. I will invite Marianne. Marianne, if you're ready for your question, go ahead and unmute yourself. And welcome.
Thank you. Good evening to the trustees and staff, and thank you for moving forward with this effort. My question has to do primarily to the consultants. I mean, I think you've touched on this, the richness of the village in the last few years in either hosting or co-partnering with nonprofits in our community of hosting charrettes, and we did the housing study. Can you speak to how you're going to integrate that information and those learnings into this effort right now?
Well, I'll just start and maybe also turn this to Simon Cates. But we do want to, we have worked, it's a couple of people or a couple of groups you may have referred to there. One is this process started with PACE. The village had worked with PACE. We have worked with PACE also in terms of their thoughts and public outreach on some other plans and planning processes. One of them was New Rochelle, where we both worked together. So we want to keep what they've done, and they've started, for instance, I think Karen just mentioned the subcommittees. They started part of that idea, and we've got a list of those people who were involved in that. But also Kevin Dworka is someone who wrote, I think, some very good housing reports based on his meetings in the village. And for instance, we will have a housing chapter on the plan. So we don't want this plan to be, we want it to be sort of based on what you've already done, and based on a lot of that work. Now that work does have to be then integrated and synthesized and reviewed by the committee and subcommittees. And hopefully we'll be able to achieve some of the best thoughts that can move forward from both of those groups.
One thing I'll add to that is Frank referred to the village's existing comprehensive plan a little bit before. Your existing plan is not that old. It's from 2009. Now, plenty has changed in the world in the last 10 or 11 years, but there are some aspects of that existing plan that might still be relevant today. And a lot of folks in the village put a lot of time into that and a lot of effort, and you've got a lot of public engagement to pull that plan together. It's a good plan, as Frank said. So we don't want to turn our backs on that and ignore it. We do want to update it where it needs to be updated. But we also want to be, it's sort of one of those reference documents that we want to look to and make sure that we're sort of incorporating everything that's out there that we can learn from.
Thanks. I don't see anybody with their hand raised right now, so I'm going to go to some of the written questions that we have here. I'll start with the first one that came in, I think, while the presentation was still going on. And it's from Gareth Huffam. Hi, when the committee will be discussing the waterfront plans, oh, he's inviting himself to offer to help. To speak about the pier extension plan to accommodate tall ships like the Clearwater and the Freedom ship Amistad, also to allow transient boats to dock, to dine on the local restaurants and to enjoy events in the waterfront. Please let me know how it can be helpful. Thank you, Gareth, for volunteering to be helpful. It does, I guess that prompts for me a related question, which is what he's referring to is a significant project that would be a significant addition to our waterfront and to accessing our waterfront. And it's a partnership project that has been done in partnership with the Hudson Valley Arts and Science Foundation, working with the stakeholders in that area and all the regulatory agencies. So just using that as an example, has the Comp Plan Steering Committee been brought up to speed on some of the projects that are underway that are going to be relevant? This is in particular to waterfront development. Has the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee been following along and been taking a look at the Cornell Climate Adaptive Design study that was done last year? And I guess that goes to the committee and to the planners, that question. And how will those studies influence or be incorporated into the decision making and the guidance going forward?
Well, I think I can start there, but I'd also defer to committee members who might be on the call. But I think in terms of the waterfront, we're going to look at the Cornell studies and the relevant studies on the waterfront. We've got a little experience with the state. We've done a number of these LWRPs, also these local waterfront revitalization plans. We did Croton's just north of you, and we're involved in some communities also south of you in their planning on the waterfront, like Tarrytown. So the waterfront, I think, is so important as an issue. Your old plan had it as a chapter. We've kept it as a chapter because we think it is very, very important. And it's, I think, a part of the village that over time is going to have opportunities for change. And you see it north of you. Peekskill, where, we just got some experience there and did their waterfront plan, has changed dramatically based on grants that they received, based on their own LWR, their own local waterfront plan. So that waterfront plan that you develop, I think, is something that one of the slides that Simon had in on COVID-19, we do think the world is not going to just end, although there might be some budget crunches. There will also be some continued programs, and some of those have been directed toward the waterfront in terms of grants. And I think this plan could be an important stage for developing hopefully a consensus or a vision on the waterfront, and then setting you up for a possibility that you can apply for grants and create an atmosphere there or a context where it might involve zoning, it might involve some capital budget items, but it might also involve state or federal funding. So there'll be a number of things that can be done there.
Yeah, if I could add one thing there,
Yeah.
Peekskill actually is a nice example for this specific type of project. The idea of extending a pier, because Peekskill has had for years a goal of rebuilding Fleischmann Pier, which is their sort of old historic sort of opportunity to have a deep water pier. Peekskill got a chunk of money just this past December from the state, from New York State, through the consolidated funding application. And so this type of planning process is one way to seed some of those ideas to then go out for funding from the state. That, by the way, that grant from the state was a sort of partial fund amount of funding, and Peekskill through the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, which we've been working on, we think is going to be able to fund the remainder of that project. So it's a good model for this specific type of project, but it could be others as well, where you get some kind of plan, you start to develop an idea like this, and it gives the village some background and some heft behind an idea to go out and get funding from the state where you may not have the capital funds locally.
Yeah, and I also just want to follow up. I mean, part of your question referred to the Cornell Adaptive Design Studio. So part of the process of any comprehensive plan is kind of this extensive lit review, looking at all the documents that have been done over the past several years that feed into the plan itself and some of the research that's done, as well as just guiding some of the information that's put into the plan. So that is definitely going to be taken a look at. There's a lot of other documents that we'll be taking a look at as well. And for people kind of zooming into this, the village website has a comprehensive plan page that lists some of the resources that were evaluated by BFJ and that are being looked at as a part of this process. And there's quite a significant list of documents that if the public is interested in seeing what's being looked at, that's not the exclusive list, but it is a big chunk of what's being looked at.
Great, thanks. So I did not, as of a couple of moments ago, I'll just double check, did not see any additional hands raised. Let's see, let me just double check. We do still have, at 30 a moment ago, somebody had to go. We have 29 folks. That's great to see so much participation in this forum. But we do have a couple more questions that folks have written in. So from Gail Marchica, who is the president of our local Chamber of Commerce, she asked if it would be possible to extend the May 1st comprehensive plan name deadline to allow more time for community input. So none of us were in the room when you all decided on these dates, and maybe you can tell us your thinking with deciding on that date, and is there room for an extension? What's your thinking there?
From our point of view at BFJ, yes, is the answer. I leave that to sort of Karen and yourselves. We don't have a particular deadline. If the committee or if the village would like to extend that to give people more time, that's fine. We just were hoping that eventually the website would have the name that's chosen, and we would develop the plan and the branding so that we use that name. But we don't want to be in a rush. So if people need more time to decide on the name, I think just extend. I would defer to you all. But as far as we're concerned, you could extend a week or two.
Yeah, well, May 1st is 2 days from now.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a little short term.
Maybe you pick Governor Cuomo's deadline for opening up to some businesses in upstate New York of May 15th. Whatever you choose is fine with us.
Yeah, and I'd like to add a note that the name of the plan really can be used as a brand to describe what the village is trying to do here. If you have a really boring name, maybe everybody forgets and they just go, the comprehensive plan. So if the village is able to come together and land on a really good name, it's something that can be used over the next decade to really kind of sell the village, sell the plan, and kind of promote the progress that the village is trying to make.
And some examples of names that other communities have had to remind folks, like get folks get their creative juices flowing.
There's the famous, Plan YC 2020, and then Westchester 2025 was a play off of that one. There's I wish I had some better names. Maybe BFJ's you can.
Well, yeah, there's in Nyack they chose Plan Nyack. Very simple, very straightforward. It's just called Plan Nyack. Other communities we've worked in have chosen things.
Well, there was Envision New Rochelle.
Yeah, Vision, right.
Envision New Rochelle.
Yeah. So, by the way, the 5 choices that are up there were sort of narrowed down by the committee a little bit from, 8 or 9 different names that we have out there from different plans. It's, by the way, and some communities have not given a name to their plan. They have simply called it the comprehensive plan of a certain community. I think North Castle chose to do that. It's the North Castle Comprehensive Plan, which we happened to work on a few years ago. So it really is up to what we thought, as Jaime said, that good name that can imply a vision for Ossining would be something that would be good to have for the plan.
Okay. So we'll be have people started voting yet? Because I haven't voted. I didn't realize that. Am I behind? Because I haven't told anybody else to, and I haven't done it myself. So
Yeah.
There are a handful, but I think it's a good. I think it is. We've only gotten a few so far. We were hoping that tonight would be a way to kickstart it, but I think it is great to a great idea to extend it. And why don't we just call it May 15th? Give an extra couple of weeks.
So, question.
yeah, Trustee
Sorry,
Casado.
Jaime, would you mind telling the rest of the board, just for them to have an idea what the 5 names of the proposal are at this time?
Yes. So the 5 names that we have listed are Ossining 2030, Nuestro Futuro, the Ossining Strategic Plan, Ossining Tomorrow, and Many Voices, One Vision.
Okay. And is there like an open space where people have what they think is an even better suggestion where they can suggest it? Although I'm not looking to have a second round of voting. So I think the final decision will have to be made based on either the votes cast or the even better suggestion that comes as a result. And I don't think there's any bylaws that we have to follow on this. It'll be it'll be decided by either the Board of Trustees or the committee.
Yes, you're right. There's nothing in state law that ever mentions it, so it's all up to you. Ultimately, it is up to the trustees. You're going to be adopting this, but we thought it would be good to give people a chance to, give their ideas, and I think the committee was very interested in hearing the ideas and sort of narrowing it down if they can.
So
Okay.
we can definitely extend the date, and we'll just make sure it gets pushed out. We've been pushing out so much information these days, but we'll extend the date. There's no harm there at all, and we'll make sure it gets pushed out and that people know about it and that they, again, get engaged. And if people want to write in, we can write in too. So I think it's the more people we have talking about this, the better.
Great.
I would
Please.
I would just be curious, out of the 28 attendees that are on right now, and they've heard the 5 choices, just as a feeler, just to see if they wanted to type in what they thought, or a choice out of that 5. Just to see if they even, to spark the interest here.
Great, that's a good idea. I'll keep an eye on what comes up on our Q&A, and we do have a couple more questions here on the written Q&A that I will share with folks now, and it goes back to our conversation about subcommittees. Silvana asks, is there a description of the task for each subcommittee beyond the title?
I could say one thing about them, and I think also, given your past experience with PACE, that maybe Karen could add to it because she's got a lot of that experience. But on I think on the subcommittees, one thing we would like very much is the ability to meet with them as a startup meeting, go through some of the plan ideas with them, but also get their input back on sort of our draft ideas, if you will, because the subcommittees, not entirely, but generally, there's the subcommittees line up with a plan chapter. For instance, a subcommittee on housing. So there'll be a chapter on housing. We'd like to get information, use the subcommittee as a way to obtain information and views from the community, but also to share with them our, if you will, our draft data and our draft ideas, and let them help formulate that before we submit, and we'll submit those to the larger, comprehensive plan steering committee. So as we write a chapter, we'd like to give it back to the subcommittee, see what they think about it, and get their input, and let them also get it out to their contacts in the community so that it sort of multiplies. Mayor, I'd say the worst thing, I always say this, but the worst thing for us, as no matter where we work, except one place that I happen to live in, Westchester, we're outsiders. The worst thing for us is when it gets to your public hearing, the trustees' public hearing, is someone gets up and says, I didn't know anything about this, and I never heard of it. we're hoping that we get outreach through the subcommittees and the subcommittee then does their own outreach and gets to different groups in the community, identifies any other groups that we should be meeting with. And as we draft things, we want these subcommittees to see them in their area of interest. And then it also, of course, all goes through our committee. And then also, we hope periodically to make reports to you as a Board of Trustees.
Yeah, and I think that it bears repeating, it was mentioned earlier in the meeting, but it bears repeating that even though we have set up a bunch of steering committees, I'm sorry, we have the steering committee and we have a bunch of subcommittees, if there are individual groups who may not be part of that process but do want to provide input, they can reach out to the village manager's office to set up a Zoom meeting to give their input on the comprehensive plan. It's something that's very important that we want everybody to get that opportunity to get that input in. And so it doesn't, you don't need to be in it on the steering committee or on a subcommittee to provide that input.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'd like to reemphasize what Jaime just said, Mayor, that in some other communities, I'm just thinking of two right now. In Nyack, we went at their invitation, sort of meeting with sponsored by the NAACP, was sponsored in a community hall. It wasn't a government meeting. They provided a very good perspective and helpful to us on some downtown issues. In Newburgh, we met in a church basement, just sponsored by the local church for predominantly in that section of Newburgh, it was predominantly, a Hispanic community. Everything was translated ahead of time into Spanish, and we got some good input from just those meetings that were, suggested to us. We're open to that, as Jaime said. Would like to do that.
Okay. I have a couple more questions here that folks have typed in, and then I'll go back and see if anybody's raised their hand and wants to speak. This one's also from Gail Marchica from our local chamber. How do we make certain this plan becomes actionable, especially in the way of focused economic development?
I can take a first crack at that, and maybe I'll turn it to Simon on the economic development or to others. But we have deliberately suggested now to the committee and to you, the trustees, that at the end of this plan, and by the way, I want to speak very highly of the 2009 plan. I happen to be, I know the principal in charge of it. He and I go way back, and it's a good plan. But one of the things that struck us was this question. The 2009 plan doesn't sort of have a wrap-up chapter, which we like to put in a plan and actually do a chart, what we call an action agenda. Here are some of the action items that the trustees want to consider, and here is their priority in terms of, is it short-term or is it longer-term? And let that serve as a sort of checklist that you might update. You might go back to, for instance, yearly, not to update the plan. We'd recommend you only update the plan fully, maybe every 10 years. That's sort of a guide in our profession. For instance, the state of Connecticut actually mandates an update every 10 years. But you could use that action agenda to see if you review it yearly, or someone might review it yearly, such as Jaime. Hey, have we done this? Have we done this? How are we doing in terms of implementing these action items? So that's what we do try to do at the end of the plan. We felt that was one area that wasn't clear for us in the 2009 plan. So we hope that we can spend some time with you all on that.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. The one thing I'll add is that action agenda. The more information that we can put in there about, as Frank said, priority and timeline and so on, is helpful. But also, who's responsible, right? Is it an action that the trustees would have to take? Is it a task that is delegated to a department head? Who takes the action? So that when folks are looking at the plan in the future down the line, and you see, oh yeah, these recommendations have been implemented, but what about the rest of these? you kind of have a sense of, all right, who was tasked with taking on that role, so that there's a little bit of accountability to it.
I think the other thing on, oh, sorry, Jaime, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so what I was going to say is that I think that it's important that, part of the comprehensive plan process in that final chapter, chapter 10, is laying out that action agenda, but it's really incumbent on staff, especially myself, to work and make sure that economic development process continues down the road. And some of that is reaching out for grants. So doing the work that we need to do on our side to make sure those grants are being adhered to. Some of that is reaching out to, developers who are willing to develop consistent with the comprehensive plan that we have. Some of that is working with the planning board and the zoning board to make sure they're clear on the goals of the comprehensive plan. Part of that is going to be done through this process of changing the zoning code and the land use code to do that. And so the comprehensive plan is helpful in laying out some of that, but I think it's also important to kind of connect the dots back to how we got to this point, and a lot of that planning work that's already been done to keep the ball rolling. The comprehensive plan is a part of the process, but the development of the village is an ongoing thing that continues. It doesn't start with the end of the comprehensive plan, and it doesn't stop with the end of the comprehensive plan either. So it's this sort of like, moving ball as it goes. And as there are projects that are going on right now, many of those are clearly consistent with the existing comprehensive plan that is in place. And much of the new comprehensive plan is going to take a lot of that good work that went into it and be carried forward, but adjusted around the margins to make these projects, to make development in the future consistent with the changing environment, but also maybe some of the changing desires of the community where they have changed. So it's again, the responsibility is on all of us, but it's particularly the responsibility is on me to make sure that what's laid out in the comprehensive plan gets followed up on.
I would also say this person asking the question had a focus on economic development. That I think we're also going to have to be flexible and look at where the real estate community is going and how it's developing. That the old idea of the office building, the new offices, new retail, and the shopping center, those things that represented perhaps historically in people's minds economic development, are in one of our slides on the COVID-19 changes, which were happening before this epidemic. But things are changing where the office market is basically more of a static market now. The retail market is slightly shrinking. So we have to look at other things that are important, and your waterfront may be one of them. I don't want to predict this yet. We're just getting into the plan, but your waterfront, tourism, Sing Sing, the aqueduct have already been identified in past plans. But also, I think people may not realize that new multifamily housing that we've seen in other communities, particularly on the waterfront, but also within the community, in other communities in Westchester, that type of development has been paying its way. It's been a form of economic development. It's been a net plus tax-wise. And I know people don't view it that way. And that's something, though, that we're going to have to at least look at the opportunities for economic development, because the traditional ones of office and retail are going to be very constrained moving into the future. They're going to be, I think, retail particularly.
Yeah, I think that, in my short time being here in the last 6 weeks, one of the things that's become very clear is that, Ossining, I think, whether you talk to taxpayers or residents or elected officials, what's clear is that people want to see the tax base increased, right? They want to see, services to continue to get better, but they don't want to see their taxes going up. And I think that a big part of this comprehensive plan is looking at identifying strategies from an economic standpoint that are going to enable the village to do that. And I think that the important part about the heavy research that goes into the comprehensive plan is identifying real ways to do that. And so there can be misconceptions about how to do that that aren't really backed up by data and statistics. So it's important that whatever plans do end up moving forward are founded in solid research that are going to get the village to a place where we can meet that goal of expanding the tax base and lowering the burden on taxpayers.
I just want to add one really quick thing to the economic development discussion. This is like one of the key areas because so much influences that, and this is where a lot of the subcommittees will overlap in a pretty significant way. So that's again why engagement, different points of view, and coming together around these discussions and really talking this through, getting experts is something we want to be able to do, and have some panel dialogues and other things. And I also want to say that we want to be really sensitive to that for our existing businesses. We understand how much economic development is going to need to be supercharged here. So not just your traditional development, bringing new business in, but what we can do to support those businesses that have been so badly hurt. So that is another focus. We're not going to wait to, we will work with businesses and the chamber and anyone else we can to make sure that we're doing things that plan is supporting things that will give pay attention to what the success we have had on this front, especially with the smaller businesses that we've seen grow in our community. So I just want to add that too.
Okay, I want to just address some of the questions and comments that have been coming up on the written Q&A. Thanks to everybody who's weighing in. Thank you to Anya Porter for providing a list of information and links. You're actually answering questions on our behalf. Thank you so much. So far, I'll just repeat the proposed new names for the comprehensive plan. We have Ossining 2030, Nuestro Futuro, the Ossining Strategic Plan, Ossining Tomorrow, Many Voices, One Vision, and we've gotten very preliminary unscientific study. A couple of votes. Trustee Fritchie, to your point, I like Ossining Tomorrow, and somebody else also said they would also say Ossining Tomorrow. So we have 3 votes for Ossining Tomorrow in these preliminary responses that we're getting.
To start.
Yep. Were you going to say something, Bob?
No, I was just curious, with that many people watching, what the mindset was out there.
That's what we've gotten so far. So I'll be interested to see if that's a landslide victory or if it's just anecdotally, we got 3 people that liked it so far. So since I wasn't even paying attention to this vote being out there, I imagine that there are others in the community who didn't know that we were asking for them to weigh in. So we'll look forward to pushing that out and getting more input from folks. And I did want to address a couple of the other questions. Somebody mentioned that they arrived late to the meeting and asked if there would be a way for somebody to see the whole meeting. And yes, as with all of our virtual board meetings, it will be available by tomorrow on the Village of Ossining YouTube site so that you can tune back in from the very beginning, see the whole presentation and all of the previous questions that were asked before you may have joined us. And then please go ahead and share it with other folks and then take action from there. Reach out and say you want to be on a subcommittee, vote for the name of the plan. And we had a question. Somebody thanked us for our time tonight. This is what we do. I'm glad you're finding the discussion helpful. And that they just wanted to comment. Their question had been addressed, but I'll reiterate it because I'm sure it's one that we'll hear again, how we will be incorporating the previous plan and other work previously done, such as the Cornell climate work. And then thank you, Gareth Huffam, who is a member of the Town Comprehensive Plan Committee. And it is kind of confusing for people who live in Ossining. We have a village comprehensive plan. We have a town comprehensive plan. And as was explained earlier this evening, the comprehensive plan of a municipality is the foundation for all of our zoning laws and regulations, which is why we have a different plan in our municipality than the unincorporated town has for their municipality. It so happens that both of us are working on our comprehensive plans right now. I think we say we're doing an update, they're doing a whole new one. So as you know, as much as I hate to confuse people in the public, hopefully we're just helping each other get the word out, and everyone will be participating in whatever way really makes sense to them. So Gareth was suggesting that there are overlapping areas of interest, and that is absolutely true. In fact, one of them would be the impact on schools, and that was related to, does somebody want to chime in?
Family dinner.
I just raised my hand, so I don't.
Oh.
I can't actually write an email through the way I came in. So I was going to wait till you saw it.
Okay. Go ahead, Rika.
No, I wanted to append to that because both the village and the town are doing comprehensive plan, there isn't a chapter on this, but it would seem, I think, a shame almost that we wouldn't find a way to combine the two, because one affects the other. When you look on the map on the presentation at the beginning, that crazy map of what fits in how, it would be really a shame if we didn't either have a subcommittee on bringing them together or find a way to bring these plans together, because, you know, while legally we're two separate municipalities and the school is a whole different, you know, municipal charge, it would be silly, I think, to the public that we didn't take this once in a lifetime opportunity where both municipalities are doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. I didn't hear it in the presentation about how we might leverage each other, so I would just like to raise that as something that I would like addressed. And I don't know if tonight's the night, but how are we going to address that?
By the way, I think that that's an important issue that we should coordinate. We always try in the beginning of a plan too, like in this plan, sort of the way Chapter 2 is structured, is to start with the region, go over what is happening at the county, their 2025 plan, but also then move to the town. What is the town doing? What are their goals and objectives? And how does that relate into the village? So I think it would be good. We would love to meet with the people who start to develop the town's plan and coordinate. The other issue is I think we're hoping through someone on our team, Tina Lund, who's done a lot of work with school districts, worked with us in Portchester where we did the plan and worked with the school district, to meet eventually with the school district also. And because that affects obviously the village, it affects the town, and it also does affect two other municipalities. So we want to be able to do that, get a handle on that a little bit. Their grade by grade projections. We know that's been an issue in the past, so we'd like to do that.
Yeah, and you know, I would note that you know, no planning takes place in a vacuum. When you're developing you know, economic development plans to get people to come to your business district, you don't just want people to come from the village of Ossining. You want people to come from the entire surrounding area to visit your restaurants and shops and everything else. So, you know, it's important to consider, you know, the needs of the general community as a whole. You know, that being said, the residents of the village of Ossining really don't have the ability to provide the guidance on what decisions the residents of the town of Ossining are going to do with their land use and vice versa.
Well,
So
I'm not. Excuse
it's
me,
important to coordinate.
I think that might need to be explained. I live in both the village and the town. So do many people. I actually live in both. And in fact, I think almost everybody that lives in the village also lives in the town. So in fact, in our case, it's exactly the opposite. And that is why I bring this to the forefront and to my colleagues who are on this, that it doesn't happen often when both municipalities do this. Shame on us if we don't figure out how to coordinate on behalf of the public that we represent. And two, many of us, myself included, live in both.
No,
And not just shop in both.
Let me just clarify. Go ahead.
Can people hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Omar.
Okay, great. So this is a conversation that happened last fall. I think you were there, Mayor Victoria Garrity, during the steering committee, really early on in the steering committee's life, saying, essentially asking that question that you're asking, Rika, should we combine these plans or should there be kind of heavy influence between the two? And I just want to put on the table that part of what was in that conversation was part of what Jaime just brought up, which was there are patterns of not only participation, but priorities. when it comes to land use specifically that we see in the unincorporated town versus in the village. And if you were to combine those, then it's less clear when you have this difference in priorities to have a plan that fully represents what both of those may be.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that when we're talking about the comprehensive plan, it talks about historic aspects, it talks about environmental aspects, it talks about things that are connected to other communities. But the specific changes that are being made as a part of the plan are to the zoning code. And so the zoning code for the village is zoning code that pertains only to the village. The zoning code for the town only pertains to the unincorporated parts of the town of Ossining, as opposed to Briarcliff Manor, which has its own unique zoning code. And so it's important to distinguish those pieces. So for the town of Ossining, when they're developing their plan, they certainly want to take into consideration, the people who live in the village of Ossining. And the village of Ossining should take into consideration the fact that, again, we don't live in a vacuum. But when we're talking about setting plans to change the zoning code, we really only have the ability to change the zoning code in the village. And so that's why it's important to distinguish those differences. And as Frank mentioned early on in this conversation, the goal is to coordinate with the town as they're doing their plan to share information, share resources. But it's really a decision of the village and the town, the extent to which that coordination will take place.
Yes, because this is so confusing too, I just want to clarify. The town is doing a comp plan for the unincorporated town of Ossining solely, not the entire town of Ossining, which would incorporate Briarcliff and Ossining. So it's very specific to the unincorporated part of the town that is neither in the village of Ossining or the village of Briarcliff. Just to make it a little bit more confusing.
No, actually, that clarified. I actually thought that they were doing more than that. I didn't realize they had limited to that. So that actually changes it.
They don't have authority to dictate any of the land use regulations for the villages.
No, I recognize that. That wasn't my point. My point is cooperation, not to do it. It just doesn't happen very often. It would be a shame not to, not combine, but actually cooperate. It's a little different. The words are a little different. Anyway, I think
okay, I think what we're hearing.
I think we got it.
Then I think we're all on the same page that we absolutely are all interested in cooperating. If we want to put combining to one unified Ossining on the table, I'm all in, but I don't think that's the conversation that we're having tonight. But I have to say at every opportunity I have, Co-Terminus Town Village, one unified Ossining. We already shared too much. This is silly. But anyway, that's a much bigger mountain to climb. Not going to happen.
I second that motion, Mayor.
Yay!
2 out of 5. Look at that.
All right. Okay, we're way getting off track. People are going to freak out if we go down that path too much. So let's rein it back into the already big project we have at hand.
Mayor, if I can just say something real quick, and that's something that you and I talked about early in the year, and I think I've spoken to some members on the school board as well. And Frank mentioned the experts that they have in our team in regards to working with the schools. We do have a member, even though it's a member from the school board into the committee itself. So it's very helpful for us to keep engaging the school as a whole in the future of our village, because it does some of the stuff that happened in the village, and especially with development, and it kind of has a second effect into our community if we don't have an understanding of what that means at the end of the day for the school system itself. So just for the rest of the board members to keep that in mind, there is going to be a collaboration between the village board, or at least the comp plan steering committee, or the committee itself for the comp plan, and the school. And going forward, how does that work together with what we're trying to accomplish for our community? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, it's important to remember that the goal of the comprehensive plan, when you're looking at economic development, I believe for the village residents and the village decision makers is to improve the quality of the schools by result of the plan. So it's important to remember there may be a belief by
That
people who
woman
live
left.
outside of the village
We
that,
didn't have a planner for 2 years.
yeah, a belief outside of the village that that their idea of how to fix it is the correct way. But I think the goal here is definitely to improve the school district through this plan. So the goals are the same.
Okay. There are a few comments on our Q&A page that are very related to what we're talking about. So I want to push those in here to make sure that everybody's being heard from. And so somebody made the point, thank you, Silvana, that whatever we name the plan, none of these choices say village in them, and that seems confusing since there is a town plan going on at the same time, but none of these choices say that. And you may have a comment on that, but I've got a couple of other related comments here that I want to, put out there at the same time. Okay. Somebody said that when they go online, and maybe this is something for us internally to be aware of, when they go online and search Ossining Comprehensive Plan, their search engine takes them to the town plan. So just exacerbating the confusion on this front that all of us are, still figuring out. Let's just stick with the same topic before we move on. Somebody else was having trouble finding a direct link to the comprehensive plan on our website. I know when we create these pages and the links and where they appear on the website, we really try to make them as prominent as possible and easy to find as possible. But it's still sometimes, maybe if we can find, and I guess Jamie, I know you're paying attention to everything we're saying. So you can see these comments, Jamie. So I'll just highlight that one. I want to make sure that person knows that we're hearing. Thank you, Alice, that you went to the village website and that you didn't find a direct link to the comprehensive plan tab. And we have things in different places. So maybe somebody looked and there was a long list and it wasn't in there. So, it's something that we should just be mindful of to try and tamp down the confusion wherever we can. And then getting back to the schools impacts and transportation infrastructure should absolutely be coordinated and or collaborated with the town, outside, school, and village. Is there a specific chapter in the comp plan? And I think Trustee Quesada, you were speaking to this, and I'd like a clarification because we moving forward with doing alongside the comprehensive plan a development impact study. And a big part of that was, what is the impact on schools? And we were talking about the importance of this not just being a village conversation, but inviting the schools, the village of Briarcliff, the town of Ossining. We could invite all of the municipalities that are in a school district to participate in some formal way in these conversations specifically about the impact. And I know that New Rochelle had done these kind of conversations and created these impact fees for if you're developing X amount of housing units, how does the developer then pay an impact fee? Or we've talked about a similar type of approach to parking. We have a parking shortage. So is there a way for when somebody is developing, whether it's residential or commercial, and they're going to be impacting the school population, can they pay a particular fee that will be set aside and dedicated to school infrastructure? Or will they be paying a separate fee that will be dedicated and set aside just for parking? So maybe you guys can update me on where our thinking is for that, and how does it align with the comprehensive plan process.
Frank, could you maybe talk about some of the preliminary work that you guys have already started with regard to that? And also, just sort of a synopsis on our conversation about communities like New Rochelle, their overlay zone, their community mitigation strategy, and how we're looking to address some of those issues in Ossining, because that's something we've talked about at length.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, one thing we're looking at, and a reason Urbanomics is on our team, is as I mentioned, they've done some work. In fact, they're recalibrating some of the work in New Rochelle that was originally done now. And then they worked with us in Portchester, which has, I think, some similarities in, I don't want to hazard a guess here without meeting with the Ossining School District, which we haven't done yet, but we intend to do that. We hope to do that. But we think there may be some similarities to what our experience was in Portchester. So we want to get the ability to look at the historical grade by grade growth, grade by grade projections. A lot of school districts have done that in-house. Some have used Suffolk County BOCES, which has a very good group that does that type of work. And look at that. Look at then potential developments that are in the pipeline or what could impacts be. So we've been talking to Karen about that, and we want to have a chapter. Many plans don't deal with the school district at all, because the school districts have been seen, well, as you know, in New York State, are totally independent bodies, and they don't usually interact very much with the municipality. Here, we'd like to do the opposite. We'd like to interact with them, understand their problems, their issues a bit. I do want to distinguish something, though, that I see between New Rochelle and Ossining. As you probably know, Mayor, we did the comp plan for New Rochelle for the current mayor, for Noam, and there's a difference there. New Rochelle decided, they had a master developer. They made a decision as a city that their downtown core had deteriorated, was not what they wanted it to be. And so they made a conscious decision, and this included the entire city council, because I was in those meetings. It was really a unanimous city council that said, we want to work with a master developer, and we are willing to go to substantial increases in density. And that was their secret, because having said that and made that decision, we were able to develop with that master developer, who became RXR, a code, a form-based code, which has increases in density to it fairly close to the train station. So it was a transit-oriented development code in the downtown. But the increases in density were substantial. And as a developer, you had to opt into that overlay zone to get that increase. And with that increase came those fees. So it was very careful that we did not call them impact fees, because impact fees outright in New York State, and I'll defer here to Stuart if he's on the call, we shied away from that because we have not seen school impact fees that were considered appropriate in terms of the law. What New Rochelle did is say, these are not impact fees, these are mitigation fees in the EIS. They came out of the EIS process, and a developer opted in. He didn't have to pay a fee unless he opted in for the higher density increase. So they were very careful legally as to how it was structured. So I want to make that differentiation, because I see a difference in Ossining where I've been told so far, and by the way, I'm hazarding a little bit of a guess here, but that density is very sensitive and height may be very sensitive. So you're a different place than New Rochelle. New Rochelle, as a city, considered itself like a White Plains, which would accept substantial height. I mean, I'm talking about 40-story buildings in the downtown, and that brought with it some substantial fees for the school district. But they were all fees that the developer opted in and agreed to pay voluntarily as a mitigation under the seeker process. I'm sorry to be so sort of detailed there, but there's a difference between New Rochelle that I think may not be able to be, or if we incorporate our work in New Rochelle, we need to be very careful how we approach it in Ossining, because I see Ossining as a smaller place, a village, not a city, and we need to be careful about, I think, heights and density and how that's done. That's all. I just wanted to, we enjoyed our New Rochelle work, but and are still working in New Rochelle on that code. We're expanding it, but it's I don't think it's easily applicable to a smaller center unless you're willing to go into a bonus system which relies on some density increase. I'm not advocating that necessarily. I'm just saying there's a difference. You've probably heard of their presentation. Luis is very good at giving, Luis Aragon, and the mayor, New Rochelle, and the development director they have a very nice presentation on all of this. But having worked on it, I see, opportunities to do something that is based on some of those principles, but I think, need to be careful as to the density picked and how it would work. We need to scale it to a village scale. That's all I'd say.
So that was, so maybe to that end, because I think this will come up in some of the questions too, because economic development more generally, housing, all these issues can drive our diversified tax base, but there is concern about density in Ossining. Some of the thoughts that we had on adapting this did involve working with urbanomics. So maybe you can just expand on that in the way, obviously New Rochelle's a much bigger city, but how these things can be adapted in our community so that we do have a shared value and mutual goals that don't compete with each other, or that everything that we do really does have a strong attention to improving our school district, our business district, and our residential housing, addressing our residential housing needs and affordable housing needs.
Yeah, I think as Jaime said, that's, I think, one of the goals of the plan is how to mix those things, how to develop something in the plan that would ultimately be reasonable for the school district over time, but also help your businesses, your existing businesses, and at the same time, recognize your community character.
I'll give, Frank, I'll give an example at the other end of the spectrum. When we did the comprehensive plan in the village of Nyack, which is a village of about 5,000 people, there weren't mitigation fees associated, but we did in a couple of different areas incorporate incentive zoning, where a developer would get additional height, additional density, nowhere near the scale of New Rochelle, right, at a village scale, but they would get those bonuses in exchange for providing community benefits. And we can evaluate what the right community benefits are. In Nyack's case, in one area, it was access to the waterfront, providing a sort of waterfront trail, complying with design guidelines, green building standards. In another area, it also, Frank, I think in the downtown area, it also included affordable housing.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So there's different types of community benefits that could be incorporated in. But if what the developer is getting is a story or two, as opposed to the New Rochelle model where they're getting, a few dozen stories, it's a little bit more difficult to apply a meaningful dollar amount to a mitigation fee. But you can still get other community benefits that are priorities of the village.
I'd like to go back to talking about the structure that this was done through with New Rochelle, and just to confirm, no, we don't want 40-story buildings in the village of Ossining. And there was one person who commented on, yeah, I sure hope Ossining is, and it's an anonymous, so I don't know who it was. I sure hope Ossining is not trying to emulate New Rochelle or Port Chester. Both have huge density, and Ossining has a river on one side. Please don't go down the route of cities. Okay, so depending on how you characterize it, that is the conversation that we're discussing right now is what does our community look like for the next decade. But in New Rochelle, they created this overlay zone that you're referring to. And they worked with RXR, who was their master developer. And they were looking for huge amounts of density, 48-story buildings, building after building after building. I don't need to go out to the community to know that is not what Ossing's comprehensive plan is going to look like. That would be, like, it's not even a conversation. But when you talk about scaling it for our village, and if you talk about creating, we have the GEIS as part of our comprehensive plan. And I don't know if we're talking about a GEIS for the whole village or if we're talking about it for the corridor from Croton Avenue down Main Street to the waterfront, which is the most densely populated, the core of our economic development business district. And if we're just whether we're talking about just that core business district corridor from Croton to the waterfront, if we are also talking about form-based codes, which I don't think is incorporated in the what you just presented earlier this evening that you're going to be working with, but form-based code, it doesn't have to say we want to give you the ability to have tremendous density. What form-based code does, and you can obviously explain it better than I can, is explain or set the guidelines for how the built environment will be integrated with, for example, a pedestrian walking down the street, how they will interface with the built environment, and then allows for more flexibility inside the envelope of the built environment. And that's something that is a different approach, and it is, my understanding is it's much more the mindset of how planning is done today rather than the approach that we have right now, which is a much more prescribed Euclidean approach to planning. Can you speak to that? And is it something that the Comp Plan Steering Committee has discussed?
Yes, Mayor. And Mayor, I think you explained it very well. There is a person on our team who I mentioned at the very beginning, Jonathan Martin, who's going to be focusing on the form-based aspects of potential recommendations that we make. Particularly, I think that would be in your more in the downtown, or where you have a quality of architecture and scale to build on. And you're right, the form-based is what it talks about. It's trying to control a little bit through design criteria, the form of the building, rather than just saying, oh, the building can just be X feet high and it has to have this coverage. That doesn't control what the building looks like. So the idea of relating the building to the street, as you mentioned, what is the curbed building? How is the street front developed? What kind of facades and window treatments and fenestration the building has. So the form-based zoning gets a little at that. And I think it may be, as the other municipalities in Westchester, it may be focused more in your downtown areas or Route 9, for instance, rather than the single-family home areas which are mostly developed. So it might be more focus on that. For instance, that's what Mount Kisco did, where we worked on that and did a form-based code, which is also an overlay downtown near their train station. But the single-family areas were left alone because they're really they're single-family homes, 35 feet, 2.5 stories, that type of thing. So. But Jonathan is on board to look at that form-based approach in Ossining. And as Simon said, we could also take an approach that there might be some incentives based into it that might be, I'm talking of, 3 stories going to 4, or minor types of things, or if you follow the design guidelines, you get something in return, or the village also, if there's any increase in density, the village gets some community benefit. There's some public benefit out of that.
Yeah. I mean, we really had been operating under the mindset, at least I had been, and I know in conversations with the manager and with the town supervisor in talking with folks in New Rochelle, and I realized we never thought that we were similar to New Rochelle in many ways, but the idea that when a developer comes to Ossining, see what happens now is a developer comes to Ossining and they go through the land use board process. Maybe they come to the board of trustees. The land use board process includes outreach to the schools, but it's not, it's, if a developer speaks with the school district and they create some sort of agreement that the developer will contribute X number of dollars for a particular project, and that will sort of soften the blow of any potential additional school students. That's sort of just negotiated one at a time. And I know, I'm sure you're aware of this, but I'll just reiterate it because I think it's important that the community knows that the comp plan steering committee and the consultants we're working with are keenly aware of this. Our school district is very crowded right now. Obviously the buildings are empty, but generally our school buildings are at capacity. And so it's not just the what's the cost of educating one student in our district. If we have 30 new students from a particular development, the question is, if we run out of space and the school needs to expand, and they're figuring that out, what would they do if they get to that point, and what could the different scenarios be? And so the concept that I, at least, and I know some other of us who have been having these conversations leading up to this point, was that there would be an opportunity for developers when they come in to contribute to the expense of what seems to be very likely school development expansion. And it's a much easier lift to be able to go to the community and say, look, we've got this great building that's going to be coming and it's going to contribute this long list of community benefits. If we can also say, when the school goes out and says, we're going to float a bond to do a major capital project, expanding the capacity in one of our school buildings, if part of that conversation with the public is X dollars have already been set aside to pay for part of this development, part of this school expansion from a developer who built in the village of Ossining, because that's where we're talking about right now. So that is a concept that we had been, a premise that we had been working with, the assumption that that was something that was on the table. And what I'm hearing tonight is that we're just not big enough to really have any, what New Rochelle calls mitigation fees, for people to opt in to this overlay zone. That any overlay zone that we offer is not going to have enough capacity for a pro forma for the financial ability for us to be able to offer something grand enough, large enough to make it worthwhile for us to have a mitigation fee attached to it. Is that what I'm hearing? Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
I think it's something that we need to get into. In other words, my sense so far is that, and this, that you might be closer to a NIAC, where in NIAC we did do this. That part of that community benefit fee that the developer could pay, that could go to the school district. So I don't want to say that that's not in the cards, but what I did want to say is that we want to call it, it needs to be something where the developer is asking for it. It's either a special permit process, or it's a process where the developer's asking for some either use or density that's strictly, as of right, he's not entitled to. Once he's asking for something, we can ask legitimately for mitigation of that and get a small fee. It'll be a smaller one than New Rochelle, simply because what he's getting in return is going to be less of a nature. I'm talking, in NIAC, we were literally talking of going from 3 to 4 stories. That's significant for the village of Nyack. And so that's the type of thing I would compare and say we could still look at that approach, but it would be on a smaller, more minor scale. But to figure it out, we do need to get into the Ossining School District's data and projections and grade by grade projections, and what they see as the future with them. As you probably know, Ossining School District is an exception, as is Portchester. to school districts all through the Mid-Hudson and Westchester who are declining in their enrollments. They're declining significantly. The birth rate has been so low in the United States for the last 30 years and getting lower. So those demographic projections are very important that the school district makes, and to see where it is projecting itself out to. And I know you're an exception. The districts, as you said, at capacity, and we just need to get into that and look at it with them, see what they need, and also then target that form-based zoning in a village scale, to scale it to the village.
Okay, Karen, I see you're unmuted. You wanted to chime in here.
Yeah, so you know, something like, obviously these are conversations that you and I have been engaged in for some time now, with the understanding that we were never going to be New Rochelle, nor did it make sense for us to be New Rochelle. I know that early on that we spoke about, so I think that like what we're really talking here is looking at that same sort of concept, and to your point, Frank, scaling it, but also recognizing that if we're talking about lower density, we're talking about less kids and proportionally less impact. I do think that it ties also directly in Ossining with the economic development strategy, which really has to go hand in hand with looking at the community comprehensively into again, what's going to provide the ability to diversify the tax base, the ability to lower the tax rate, the ability to lower impact on the school district, and based on one of the other things, and this is where planning with other communities could be valuable. So this is where looking at what the town's doing and what the village is doing, and possibly even in terms of development, what other neighboring municipalities that are in the school district are doing, could maybe you know, shape our thinking a little bit too. So it's a conversation that we have to adjust for where we live, but it's not to say that that adjustment couldn't be done in a way that also provides some of the benefits that we need to offset negative impact and perpetuate good, healthy economic development.
Okay, well, I just am looking. I don't see any hands raised, at least as of another moment ago. And I think we've gotten through most of the written Q&A, but there is one that I'll just reiterate because we try so hard to get the information to be easily accessible and understood and searched for and found. But it's important for us to hear when people aren't finding it. And one other person said, you know, if more community participation is wanted, streamlined communications and where information is posted. For example, the survey vote isn't on the village page, it's on the BFJ planning page. I think as a new resident, more clear and streamlined way to get and learn info would be helpful and appreciated. So people are still having a little bit of trouble finding the information. So that's hopefully helpful feedback, and we can continue to improve on that front. And I think that's it for all of the written questions, and I did not see any hands raised as of a moment ago. So we have now reached the 9 o'clock hour, which was sort of our unofficial ending time. So I want to open it up to anybody from village elected staff and our BFJ planning team that wants to give any final thoughts or wrap it up for us. Oh, Rika, your hand is raised. Is that a current raise or is that an old raise?
It's an old one. That's from a while back.
Would anybody else like to raise their hand or just chime in? You don't have to raise your hand anymore.
I just one question. I know we talked about the schools, which is a hot button item. I'm going to go back to parking. You know, is there a chapter about parking or the future of parking in the village?
There will be a chapter on transportation and parking. So that is something we're going to look at. Our firm BFJ, the J is Georges Jacquemart, who's a traffic engineer, and George will be looking at that. And I also think that I just defer to Karen. Karen, I think you're looking to also eventually a larger study through an RFP.
All right. Yes, so what we're trying to do is if you all remember, we received a grant for a parking study. It was a matching grant. So we do have the funds in the budget to implement that study. And actually, we're working on the RFP for that study as we speak, and it'll be something that we'll do in conjunction with, it will really augment the parking chapter for the comprehensive plan.
Who else? Okay, I'm just double checking that I don't see anybody else with their hand raised. I make sure that no other Q&A questions came up before we say goodnight. And then my last question, I guess, would be what's next besides voting on a name? And we got some feedback on our names. None of them say village in them. So I don't know if we're gonna all coalesce around a name that we're really excited about so that we can all refer to it in an easy to remember way. But besides voting on the name, are there next steps that we can be looking forward to and that we can start getting the community ready to respond with and engage on?
I do want to say that I believe, correct me, Simon, I have May 19th in my mind as the next committee meeting. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah. So that we're gearing up for, Mayor, and we're going to, Jonathan is working on zoning, is sort of touch on the land use and zoning chapter in a preliminary way. And this conversation tonight was very helpful because Jonathan does our form-based work. So we're working toward May 19th, which suddenly is not that far away.
Okay, so Trustees Lopez and Quesada, is there anything that wasn't covered that you wanted to give us an insight on about the what the Comp Plan Steering Committee has been up to or what we can expect next?
One little note and one big note. The little note is that we did discuss having the word village in the name, and basically the two camps are, camp one is, yes, let's include it for clarity's sake. Camp two is, let's not include it for simplicity's sake, but then have a colon and say, let's say like many voices, one vision, colon, the Village of Ossining Comprehensive Plan or something like that. So it's something that over time you can use that the branding would be sticky and so forth, but that was, okay, that's a little point. And then the big point is that I'm really just grateful for the time and energy that you all are putting into this. This is a super, super important thing, and the work goes on. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Quesada.
Yes, no, I want to thank everyone for actually being part of this whole conversation. And I think at some point the village board needs to make a decision on which way do we want to do this analysis of the EIS. Either we're going to go with a negative declaration or positive declaration on this, because that will give our consultants a time frame in what we need to do as well. So that's something that I think we have to have a discussion. I don't want to say pretty soon, but pretty soon, to we can guide them on what what are the next steps are that they need to take as well, because that affects a lot of the stuff that we that's going to be affected part of the comp plan itself. So that's just something that I think we need to have this a more in-depth discussion in a work session form, I guess.
So Jaime, I guess you would be the person that I would ask as far as, is that a conversation that we should be incorporating into an upcoming work session so that you can make sure that we understand what we're considering? I mean, I think a positive declaration is pretty likely, which for anybody following home means that there will, we acknowledge that there will be an impact on the environment. So what does that process look like, and what are the questions we're specifically asking ourselves? Or you don't have to get into the details right now, but like for us to run the process, you would recommend.
So the high level details are that I would assume that there is going to be a positive declaration. In the actual the calendar events, I guess you would call it, that was pointed out at the beginning did have that in there. And so the assumption is that there's going to be the preparation of an EAF, a POS deck. At that point, there's going to be a scoping process to determine the extent of the environmental impact statement and the areas that are going to be looked at. And then you have to go through the process of doing that review, public hearings, and so on and so forth. I did, maybe to make a quick note back to compare that and differentiate the EIS that's going to be looking at the comprehensive plan and some of the zoning code changes that are going to take place, which is different from form of the EIS or the GEIS that took place in New Rochelle. That GEIS was looking at a rezoning, so there were a lot of developments that were able to take place without, necessitating a new EIS for those specific projects, site specific. So even as this comprehensive plan is going to have an EIS that looks at that, it's not going to preclude the environmental review that's going to go into new projects that are going to get developed over time. I did want to distinguish that because that is an important.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I just see a lot of nodding. So I think that means that we've all gotten all of our questions and thoughts out for this stage, and we're all gonna, if we haven't already voted, we're gonna vote, and Jaime and Village Management Office will figure out when we can have the conversation as an elected board, so that we can move forward with the EAF and those steps that we were just identifying. Frank is nodding his head, so I guess that's that. I'm hearing correctly what we should be doing, and I think we got a lot of really helpful feedback and questions from the public already this evening, and I look forward to figuring out how we can expand on that engagement. Not everyone can dedicate 2 hours of a Wednesday evening to watching a meeting, but I'm excited to see who's going to raise their hand and say they want to be part of a subcommittee. And I know we have some really engaged people in our community that we are already in touch with or will be soon, so that they can be sure to be part of that process. Karen, Board, is there anything that I'm forgetting?
I think you covered it very well, and maybe have a post-mayoral career in planning and development. So,
I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention Euclidean zoning outside of a planning.
I know, right?
I was pretty impressed by that.
So
I love it. I'm really gonna miss it. I'm sorry I'm leaving at this stage in the comp plan process, actually.
Yeah. So you're quite a good study. All your Lula training has definitely paid off. Thank you to BFJ, to Jaime, to Maddie and Jamie, who are doing a tremendous job of getting information together, and we'll do better at making sure that this is in a concise location and that it's easily accessible. Thank you to the board. Thank you to the steering committee, and everybody else who is getting involved or will be involved in this process. Again, the more engagement we get, the better this plan is going to be, and the more actionable it's going to be, and the more that action is going to benefit the more people. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Okay. Good night.